This is going to be short and sweet, but it's environmental law, and a lot of what's covered in this chapter is more commercial. If you ever get up to do commercial real estate, you're going to go, wow, there's all that involved too. So just bear with us, understand it exists. There's a few little terms that you may need to know, and a lot of that we covered in the real estate principles class, what you actually need to know for the test, the residential test. This is more of a commercial area that it gets into here. Okay, because the first thing it starts out with is this thing called CERCLA. CERCLA is a statute whose purpose is to provide regulatory mechanisms for cleaning up inactive waste sites that release hazardous substances in the environment. So we have CERCLA sites. We have they're big industrial manufacturers. Fernald could have been a CERCLA site. You know, where places were going on, we're doing development, making things, putting off a lot of hazardous waste. Those companies may not be in business anymore, but we own the land. The land's there. Somebody has to clean it up. So the government created this thing called CERCLA to help get these sites cleaned up, to at least make them clean, because they continue to pollute. They pollute groundwater. They pollute the areas around them. So these sites have to be cleaned up. So CERCLA created a super fund. It's a hazardous substance response fund, which was established to provide source of funds for cleaning up hazardous waste sites. And in order to implement the cleanup activities or response costs can be incurred by federal or state officials or private parties. But a private party, if they want to buy the land, they typically run out of money really quick, unless they're a well-funded developer. What they're trying to do is go back to the business that is no longer in business. They created the problem, and that's why they're coming back to the government to say, hey, we need help cleaning this up. This business is no longer in business. Now, so Ohio was bought by British Petroleum. There are old Ohio gas stations all around America. And when they closed them up and when they redeveloped them, BP still has a fund that it's money they hold in reserves to be able to give back to property owners when they discover their gas tanks that weren't closed properly. And you go back and you apply to BP and you say, hey, wait a minute, this was a former Ohio gas station. You all developed the problem. You made the problem. Now we want you to help us pay for it, cleaning it up. Ohio Casualty bought an old BP gas station. I didn't know it when I first started with the land. It was paved over. It's part of a parking lot. So we didn't know what it was until we did phase 1, phase 2 environmental, and we found out, oh, shoot, it's a BP site. It's an old Ohio. And then when you talk to people who live there, of course it's an old Ohio. We remember when it was a Ohio gas station. But, you know, when you go drive by it today, you wouldn't have a clue. But what I found out through the process is we did do a phase 2. We investigated the site. We did soil samples. We could actually see where the cavities were, where the gas tanks were, and everything. And by going through this process, we found that they had cleaned up the site properly. When they closed up the gas tanks, they pulled them out properly. They closed up the site properly. But if they hadn't done it, we had attorneys that were ready to go file to BP to get money to help us out. So again, BP says, hey, we know we're big boys. We bought these Ohio gas stations. We're still in business. We got to set aside money to do this. But go to an old piece of the property that was an old dry cleaning site. That dry cleaner's long out of business. The old tool and die manufacturing site on another parking lot, tool and die manufacturing property. They're gone. They're out of business. So where do you go to get money to clean up this stuff? You go back to the state, federal, to get money to help you clean them up, so that you can redevelop them, to do the cleanup.
So what you said, tool dining? You said two things. You said a dry cleaner and what was the other one?
It's a tool and die manufacturer. Tool and die manufacturer. Machine shop. Tool and die. Machine shop, where they made machines, but very heavy industrial greases and wastes that were used in the process to build. So again, you've got these things where people are trying to clean up sites, they want to redevelop them, because it's right at Main and Main, at the main corners in downtown Hamilton. And when it was built there in the early 1900s, it made sense. Today they're gone. We want to clean up these sites. So we have CERCLA funds. We have state and federal funds to help do this kind of stuff.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thinking about that concept, a lot of homes here in Cincinnati use oil heating oil, and so they have these tanks underground. And sometimes when you walk, you see a little pipe on the ground. So what's that? Well, it's an old said, okay, well, are you gonna take it out of there? Does it get disposed of? I don't know, it just sits.
Well, in the house, the neighborhood I grew in, up in the house was built in the 50s and 60s, they weren't put underground, they were in the basement. The heating oil tank. We used to bang into it all the time on the roller skates. The crash land. But yeah, when they were a little older from the 40s and 30s, they actually buried them in the ground.
Right.
And those are environmental issues when you buy a house. Who's going to pull it out?
That's my question.
It absolutely is an environmental issue because it's an underground storage tank, UST. And you can have them tested to see if they're solid and they're safe, but the reality is in residential, it's cheaper to literally just pull them out of the ground. It costs a couple $1,000s. It'd be the same as if you had a septic system. You have somebody come in with a bulldozer, pull it out of the ground, but then test the soil around it to see what's there. So you're buying this house today, it still has this underground storage tank. You find out about it. You're saying, well, wait a minute, I'm buying it, but I'm an innocent landowner. I don't want to have to pay for this. I want somebody else to pay to get this cleaned up. Well, today, it's not commercial. We don't have a place to go back to like commercial properties do, this CERCLA fund. So what you have to, and usually it's just between the buyer and seller as to how they're going to pay to get it cleaned up. But they can go, well, I don't know what they are. I'm sure there is something. I'm sure there's something because we've got a lot of problems with them and it's better to get them pulled out of the ground. But the problem, even once you pull the tank out of the ground, if the tank leaked in the ground, what are you going to do with it? When you pull anything out of the ground like that, you pull asbestos off a property, you own it. Your name's on it. No matter where you pull it out and take it to another site to get it buried in that dump, your name stays with it. So as a residential unit, does that do you any good? Sometimes you're better off if you find it's not harmful, leave it in the ground. So that's part of an environmental study you'd have to do on it. Again, residentially, we're not set up to do that a lot. Commercially, absolutely. We know exactly where to go, what to do. Because we see it in commercial properties on a regular basis. I don't have the best answer for you about where you go and what you do with it. So the liability that we have is to recover parts that cost potentially responsible parties. Plaintiff must prove 5 elements. Place involved is a facility. Facility caused the release. The defendant is potentially responsible party. Damages sought were necessary, costs incurred to respond to the release. And the plaintiff followed the NCP, this cleanup protocol. Again, if the business is in business, we have money to go back after. If the business is not in business, we go back to the state and federal government. Residential, I'm sorry, again, the answers just are not available. They're not there. All this NCP process, this is all commercial stuff. Defenses are few and narrow. The innocent landowner defense provides the defendant may not be liable if certain tests, including did not know or have reason to know, and all appropriate inquiry into previous ownership and uses of the property are met. So what does that mean? You did a phase 1 environmental. You looked at the history. That's all phase 1 does. It looks at the history of the property, the users. It's a title search. Phase 2, you go in and you do some testing. Phase 3 is where they actually go in and they clean up the site. Phase 2 is enough where people can go in and they'll find out what contaminants they're working with. Is the property still contaminated, but it can still be redeveloped commercially the way it is? Is it contaminated and you have to clean it up? Or is it not really contaminated? You can build residential on top of it. Ultimately, that's what you want. But okay, so downtown Hamilton, you've got these old tool and die places that are the parking lots. Are you really going to want to put a residential property right there? No. Would you put multifamily there? Probably not. Would you put commercial use there? Yes. They're clean enough to be commercial use. Nobody's sleeping in the property overnight from all the pollution that's coming up through the ground. That's what they're saying. It's clean enough for commercial redevelopment. Again, so because mortgage companies are involved in the lending of commercial properties, mortgage companies can ultimately become the owners by default. They make property owners, commercial property owners, go through lots of investigation. They want to know all these answers. So this is all done as a result of commercial real estate on a regular basis. Damages. A person can recover response costs, including costs of assessing and planning the cleanup. CERCLA places an affirmative obligation on federal and state governments to seek to recover natural resource damages caused by the release of hazardous sediments. Again, if those companies are still in business. If they're not in business, where do you go? You're going back to the government.
So was like Fernald covered by like the Superfund?
Parts of it was, but Fernald there was still a commercial enterprise. But yeah, and they paid out lots of money to the people who lived around there too.
Yeah.
because they had damages from being exposed, groundwater, breathing, all kinds of things from phenol. Not, again, that's not even the people that worked on the site. This is just the property right around it. But today, if you go onto the site, it's a park.
Yeah, it's only like 3 miles from
And,
my house.
but you would never know what
I
it
didn't
was. You didn't know that it had plutonium on it and all the other fun stuff
No.
that they did there. Yeah,
Uranium.
uranium.
Yeah.
They were doing nuclear stuff for nuclear bombs and stuff there.
Where is that?
West side.
Yeah, it's Ross, New Baltimore.
Is it by the river?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
River Road, Cleves.
Cleves.
Yeah.
Yep. So the Brownfield Initiatives, former industrial sites in urban communities that have fallen into disuse and decay that often contain hazardous waste. The federal government is trying to revitalize urban communities by encouraging the cleanup and redevelopment of brownfield sites. So next to this tool and die parking lot that we own, the city also owned part of that tool and die parking lot. The city declared their piece brownfield. They didn't tell us. We were the adjoining property. We were all part of the same history of use. They didn't tell us they declared their piece of brownfield site. It didn't make any difference to us. But what the city declared a brownfield site because the city was trying to go get federal funds to help them clean it up. Today, it's still all sitting there as a parking lot. They haven't been able to get businesses interested in redeveloping it. But they were trying to get in line to get money to help clean it up. State CERCLA type statutes. Several states have enacted their own CERCLA type laws that often focus on real estate transactions or make real estate transactions a trigger that sets off an inquiry into possible existence of hazardous waste on site. When I worked for McDonald's, I tried to get a hold of a site in Mount Washington that was a dry cleaning site. And when I worked for McDonald's, the owner of the dry cleaning site was going through his own voluntary action plan, VAP, to clean up his site. He paid environmental people to come in, look, do the phase 1, do the phase 2. He paid for him to clean up. He did the phase 3. He put it all back together again, cleaned up all the little contaminants from the dry cleaning site. As McDonald's rep, I said, we want to buy this site. McDonald's came back to me. This was in the late 80s or late 90s. McDonald's came back to me and said, no, we don't want to buy it because even though Ohio says it's a clean site, the federal EPA does not recognize it. And as McDonald's, we're not going to put a store on that site, spend $1 million. To put a store on that site, only for the federal EPA to come back someday and say, wait a minute, there's still some chemicals left over there that we don't like. Now you got to close the store down so we can go back in and get the rest of them. And McDonald's, by the way, you own it now. You got deep pockets and you're going to be responsible for cleaning it up. So McDonald's said, no way, we won't buy that site. About 10 years ago, federal government said they recognized everything Ohio did for the VAP program. So the federal EPA said what Ohio was doing for the VAP program was fine. It was as good as being declared by the federal government as a clean site. So now McDonald's would say they can buy it. They no longer have an argument to say, no, we're not going to touch it. But so some of these sites that McDonald's wants to get into, they're, again, old dry cleaner. Who would think what it has in it, that little neighborhood dry cleaner was right there on the main drag. Those are all redevelopment properties. What are we going to do? You know, how do you do that? So there's a lot involved in all this federal cleanup and stuff, but like I said, the other things you guys need to really be concerned about is lead paint. Anything built before 1978 has lead paint in it. Asbestos, radon, if you need to have a radon gas test done. So you're going to declare things. You want to make sure that the property owner, that if you're a listing agent, they put all the stuff on the property disclosure form. Make sure they list everything on the property disclosure form, that any environmental nature. If you're representing a buyer, you want to make sure you look at that property disclosure form to make sure that buying something that's contaminated isn't bad. It can be contained inside or it can be taken off site. But yeah, you want to factor in the economics of cleaning it up and being able to live there. Mold is another thing. Mold in a basement, mold in a house is another environmental hazard. So again, what you all need to know, not part of what's in this chapter, but it's more of the residential kind of problems that you'll run across when you're selling real estate. Those are things that'll be on your real estate exam. These kind of things aren't really going to be on your real estate exam. Clean Water Act. Statute's purpose is to cleanse, maintain, enhance quality of nation's water resources. What's going on with something like Clean Water Act today? What do you know about it?
They ain't using it for the Ohio River.
The Ohio River is cleaner today than it was when I was a little girl and swimming in it every weekend.
You swim in it?
Swimming in it every weekend.
That mean they got in your mouth a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. I don't tick. I don't do anything. No, we used to go boating every weekend when I was a little girl. My dad had a power boat. We'd go boating. We'd dock at 9 Mile Road on Anderson Township. We'd go up to Melville Dam. On the Kentucky side of the Melville Dam is a beach. And we'd go up to that beach every weekend. We'd actually dock our boat at Point Pleasant, which is where Grant's birthplace was. And we'd eat our picnic lunch there every weekend. And then we'd go up and we'd water ski and we swam in the river. And then when I was older, as an adult, I found out there was fish in that river bigger than me. Piss on me. But the other thing was my dad was also a scuba diver. And my dad would scuba dive in the Ohio River, and he couldn't see past his face. But my dad was also a paramedic. So he would dive for dead bodies. They do water rescue. So we'd be there on the boat, and all of a sudden there'd be a call come through, and we'd be pulling over, and we'd be sitting out camping out while he was doing a bottle rescue. Yeah, but the river was a lot dirtier in the 60s and 70s. A lot dirtier than it is today. It's cleaned up quite a bit. And my dad always said he wanted to go north of Cincinnati because he didn't want all the pollution from Cincinnati coming into what we were swimming in. But meanwhile, we were still getting pollution from Pittsburgh and everywhere else coming downriver. And then again, right outside the Melville Dam is where the water's the cleanest because it's right after the dam where it's coming out. Yeah. So what's going on with Clean Water Act? What's going on with the Clean Water Act today is a lot of the things that were enacted, they've scaled back on. We've done a lot to clean up water, but some of the going forward things are not as strict as they used to be. It's easier for them to find problems, to find people that are polluting in the water, but where we're going with environmental going forward in the future, they're trying to ease back on the regulations, which is not a good idea. Not at all. Industrial dischargers. Effluent standards are technology-based standards imposed on major industrial sources of water pollution. Most industrial sources have adopted the technology necessary to meet effluent standards, so they test what comes out of them. Okay, so in downtown Hamilton, where this tool and die factory was, 6 blocks from the river, 3rd Street, below 3rd Street was a hydraulic waterway where it literally took the waste from that tool and die factory and all the other factories that were on it, took the waste from them and flushed it in the Great Miami River. Because that's what they did in the 1900s, 20s, 30s. They literally were taking these and flushing it. They didn't have these effluent standards. They were literally flushing that all in the Great Miami. So 2 significant areas of water pollution are inadequately addressed by point source, which is toxins dumped in the water, and non-point source of pollution. We still have some problems, but it is much greater control over that today. Clean Air Act. Statute's purpose is to cleanse, maintain, and enhance the quality of the nation's air resources. Who gets impacted by Clean Air Act? Everybody that has a smokestack, including Duke Energy and all the others. Power plants. What are they putting out? They're burning coal. So they have a lot of things they have to do for Clean Air Act. So if they bring coal back, make coal more of a resource of America, the problem is they're not stepping this up either. They're letting some of this down. Other legislation. We have other federal, state, and local legislation either indirectly or affected real estate transactions. Again, not a whole lot you all have to be concerned about. There are things going on all the time, but most of this is all being scaled back because the government's been too overreaching, trying to control some of this stuff. And today's politicians are saying we want to pull back on some of this stuff. Indoor pollution, something you need to understand about. Pollution within buildings may come from many sources. Now recognize this serious health problem. We have something called sick building syndrome. The Alms and Defty building downtown, when my husband worked down there years ago. They found it was a sick building. We still get articles every now and then. He could have been part of a class action lawsuit. He didn't want to. He wasn't working there long enough. But we would get mailings all the time from that because it had sick building syndrome. They literally shut the building down and vacated the building while they cleaned it out.
So that's like the police station.
Yeah.
Almost Deputies at the corner there, Central Parkway, where the courts and stuff are.
It's like the police station.
Yes, the police station over here down the hill, right here. Yeah, they're claiming it makes people sick working there. But what makes it sick? A lot of the sick building syndrome, Mr. Green, he's standing. What causes sick building syndrome? I'm asking because he knows about HVAC systems.
Sick green says it could be mold in the AC system,
Mhm.
the ductwork, ventilation.
And if they're not treating the water that's in the HVAC system to clean out some of that stuff, they continually pump more of it in the air. It keeps being pumped through the air. That's sick building syndrome, huh? Freon leak can do that too, but Freon doesn't. It's the mold that makes people sick. Legionnaire's disease was a big thing back. What they called it was Legionnaire's disease. So environmental tobacco smoke. I was listening to something this morning that says kids are healthier today because people aren't smoking as much. They thought that if they said you can't smoke in your office building, you can't smoke in restaurants, but people will smoke like crazy in their cars. They'll smoke like crazy in their houses. But they said no, what they found people were doing is they're hiding smoking from their kids so they don't even smoke in their houses anymore. They're going outside to have their smoke break. So everybody's healthier right now, but that was a big issue years ago. I remember being little trying to go to a bowling alley, and I'd get sick from all the smoke. Yeah, and today you can go to a bowling alley, it's like, wow, this place isn't so bad.
Oh, this is the whole lane.
Yeah, yeah. So drinking water is a problem. I will not get a drink out of the fountains in this building. How old is this building? This building dates back to the 50s. It's one of the Quarter Tech High School. But what concerns me is I've seen buildings, this isn't so bad, but I've seen water tanks that are the source water for buildings like this, and I won't go near them. When I get water on my way out of here, I actually stop in the business office where they have their own little bottled water that comes in. So drinking water is a problem, okay? We know about that from Michigan. We know about that in other areas. But we also have a problem here in Cincinnati where if they're not treating our water pipes all the time, we could have lead in our water too. Radon in the basements of houses. Newer houses don't breathe. So the radon gas doesn't get released out in the atmosphere. It comes in the house. Again, when I started this business, we were doing radon tests every time we were buying a house, every time we were selling a house. Today, I'm not hearing as much about it, but radon is still something people want to be concerned about. Asbestos. House, again, built before 78. You've got an old hot water heater system in your house. The pipes were all wrapped with asbestos. Lead-based paint, obvious a problem, and then the sick building syndrome we talked about. So these indoor air pollutions are the things that impact residential real estate more than anything. Green development. This is a form of land development that integrates economic, environmental, and social considerations. LEED, the whole environmental building right. We have smart growth. We have environmental responsiveness, resource efficiency, community and cultural sensitivity, and then costs and benefits of green development. So you'll just see a little bit about some of that stuff, not much.
What is LEED?
Leadership in Energy and Excellence of Design, and I should know because I'm a lead AP, but I always forget what the LEED stands for.
Leader of what is it?
Leadership in Engineering Excellence Design, I think, but I got to look it up because I forget all the time. Look it up real quick. Somebody's got a phone. Look up LEED, L-E-E-D. What's it stand for? Somebody look it up real quick. Somebody looking it up? LEED?
Leadership in energy and
Environmental design. Energy and environmental design.